Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Good Thursday afternoon. I think it's Thursday. Hope you're doing well. We're getting closer to the end of the week. I wanted to share a Rashi with you, a very interesting Rashi on this Parsha of Tezaveh. Two Rashis we're going to actually do. I apologize for those. I don't know if there's actually anybody on here who was there, but those who were at Minyan this morning or at my Chabura last night, because I mentioned pieces of each of these Rashis, but they're both worth repeating if you were there. I don't think any of you were. So the Torah speaks, of course, about all the garments of the Kohanim, the Kohen Gadol, the initiation into service in the Mishkan. And the Torah tells us about the garment worn by the Kohen Gadol called the tzitz. The tzitz was the plate that went on the Kohen Gadol's head, which was attached with two strings of techeles around the mitznefes. And it said Kodesh LaHashem on it in some fashion. It was embossed on the outside of that golden plate. And that plate here in Pasuk Lamed Chet is described in terms of its role. V'haya al metzach Aaron, it should be on Aaron's forehead. V'nasa Aaron es avon hakodashim, and Aaron, by wearing this thing on his forehead, will be nasa. We'll come back to that word in a second, but in some way it'll forgive the sins of the sacrifices. Asher yakdishu b'nei Yisrael, that Jewish people might have sacrificed improperly. L'cho matnos kochehem, v'haya al mitzchot tamid, it should always be on his forehead, l'ratzon lahem lifnei Hashem, as an appeasement for them before Hashem. So in some way, Aaron wearing this is a form of ritzui, an appeasement, a form of atonement, a form of initiating the process of forgiveness from Hashem for something Jewish people did wrong in terms of their korbanos. This is a whole complicated sugya, exactly what this is referring to. But in some point, if the Jewish people sacrifice something and it ends up being something that was tameh, they sacrificed through tumah, through impurity, they would need to atone for that. And the tzitz was designated as the thing that atones for it just by the very fact that the Kohen Gadol was wearing it. So the first thing to note is the meaning of this word nasa, which I think is fascinating, really, really interesting. Nasa can have two meanings in the Torah or in Tanakh. Nasa can mean to lift or to carry or to raise up, like by the Nisim, for example. That's why they're called Nisim, the presidents, the princes, the chiefs of the tribe. They're Nisiim, they're raised up. Or in Parshas Naso, we're told to count, counting the Jewish people, counting the Levium, Naso, Es Rosh, etc., etc., raise up the heads of these tribes. It's the same kind of word, Nasa, Naso. It's all based on the idea of raising up. But Nasa can also mean to forgive. Nosei Avon Vafesha, we call Hashem in the Yud Gimel Midos. He's Nosei Avon. He wipes away, he cleans, he forgives iniquities. So nasa can have both meanings, and Rashi over here says actually it's both. It means both, and the two meanings of the word are related. The pasuk is telling us the Kohen Gadol would wear the tzitz, wear this plate on his forehead, v'nasa es avon kodashim, and he will be nasa, the sin of the sacrifices on behalf of the Jewish people. So nasa, Rashi says, is lashon slicha. He will effectuate forgiveness for the mistakes the Jewish people made in terms of their sacrifices. But, he says, we don't depart from the normal, regular, plain meaning of the word nasa. It's still very much the meaning in this pasuk as well, the idea of carrying. How is it related to forgiveness? Aaron nosei es hamasa shel ha'avon nimtza mesulak ha'avon min hakodashim. By wearing this plate, it's sort of a double entendre here of the pasuk. By wearing the plate, he will be nasa, he will forgive the sins, because he is nasa, he's lifting or carrying or raising the sins off of the Jewish people almost and onto himself. So he both is carrying nasa, the load of the sins, and by doing so, nasa, lashon slicha, effectuates the forgiveness for them from Hashem. And so that's how this word is related to both meanings in this pasuk. It's a beautiful way that the Torah actually links us into both meanings and the relationship between them. And in other psukim, in other contexts, it may mean more of one definition or more of the other, but they're certainly both related all the time. Okay? whether it's the Kohen carrying the burden of the sins or God, Nasa, God carrying the burden of the sins. In any way, the people are forgiven because someone lifted the sins off of them. That's the image that the Torah is trying to evoke by using the word Nasa instead of some other word to connote forgiveness. Okay, that's the first word I want to analyze in the pasuk. The second word is, of course, tamid, and we talked a lot about tamid over the last two parshios. So, v'haya al mitzcho tamid. This should always be on his meitzach, always be on his forehead. If you remember back in Parshas Truma, and in the beginning here of Tezaveh, we had two instances of tamid. In Parshas Truma, we had the tamid of the lechem hapanim, and I believe on Monday we discussed here in this forum the beginning of Parshas Tezaveh, lahalos ner tamid, to raise the candle always. And Rashi over here notes that tamid can have different meanings in the Torah. This is what we studied the other day. Tamid could be consistent or constant. In the lechem hapanim case, it's constant. There always has to be lechem hapanim on the shulchan, even so much so that when they put the new ones in, they slide the other ones out. So there's never a second without a lechem hapanim. But tamid, in the case of laha'alos ner tamid, the case of the menorah in the beginning of our parsha, was not about constancy, it was about consistency. It's not like the Kohen is there at every second of the day lighting. It's that he lights now, and he lights tomorrow, and he lights the next day. It's consistent, not constant, okay? The problem is, when you get to this tamid, by the tzitz, it's neither consistent nor constant, and therefore has to be reinterpreted. It's not constant because the Kohen has to go to the bathroom. He has to sleep. He has to leave to go home. When he leaves, he has to take off the big day kahuna. There are many points in the day where he's not able to wear the tzitz. So it's absolutely impossible that it's constant. But it's also not consistent. He doesn't wear the tzitz the same way, at the same time, for the same reason every single day or in a pattern of every single week. It's more random than that. So Rashi quotes a machlokas from the Gemara in Yuma about how to read tamid in this pasuk, and it depends on another machlokas, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, about whether they believe that the tzitz can forgive on behalf of the Jewish people, atone for the Jewish people only when it's on his forehead or even when it's not on his forehead. The answer to that question will dictate how to read tamid in this pasuk. But there's two readings that Rashi cites over here. Either tamid is related to mitzcha or tamid is related to l'ratza. So the easiest way to read it is v'haya al mitzcho. This tzitz should be on his forehead, comma, tamid l'ratzon lahem lifnei Hashem. Always to effectuate ritzui, appeasement from God. Meaning, whether it's on his head or not on his head, it's always going to effectuate ritzui. That's the position of Rabbi Shimon. That's how he reads the pasuk. He puts the comma over here. V'haya al mitzcho. It should sometimes be on his forehead, but even when it's not, it's tamid l'ratzon. That's how he reads tamid. So tamid is not modifying meitzach, it's modifying l'ratzon. And that gets out of this problem of constant and consistent altogether. Rabbi Yehuda can't read it that way because he only believes that the tzitz effectuates ritzui, appeasement, forgiveness, when it's on his head. So he can't read tamid as modifying ratzon. He has to read tamid as modifying meitzach, but he can't default to the definition of constant or consistent. So he comes up with something else. He says, because it's such a holy item, the Kohen could easily get distracted when it's on him, and therefore what the pasuk is telling us, haya al mitzcho tamid. When it's on his forehead, the Kohen always has to focus on it. In fact, he always has to touch it, adjust it, play with it, so that his focus, his attention is constantly on the tzitz, and he never gets distracted. So tamid is not modifying when he wears it, but really the way that he wears it, encouraging him to always be focused on it and never get distracted. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
You too,
Thank you.
Rabbi.
You too, everybody.
So
you.
Rabbi, doesn't the Rambam then say, and that's why we have to always pay constant attention to the tefillin?
It's the end of the Gemara.
Gemara.
It's the end of that Gemara in Yuma. The end of that Gemara. The punchline is Kal v'chomer to tefillin. If the Kohen Gadol, who was in this situation, such holiness, could get distracted and has to be encouraged to focus on it, then all the more so what we put on our foreheads with the tefillin. That's the end of that Gemara. Exactly. All right. Thanks, everyone. Be well.